Welcome everyone to the Voices of Terminus show. I'm joined by Lex. Say hello, Lex.
Hello, people.
Say hello, Josh.
Hi, guys.
And we have Shy with us in the background to catch any questions, thoughts, ideas that you guys have during the show for us to talk about towards the end of it. Today's topic is going to be on future races for Pantheon. We're going to look at it from two perspectives. One from the existing lore and existing races that we have, and then basically one where we just discuss outside possibilities that we could possibly see happen. I'm also going to try and reconnect to the show we did back in 2017 on the heritage system to kind of see how we could make that possibly work with the future races as well. So let's dig in and get the show going. So we've gone through all the lore on the races. We know there are 9 races. To start off with, we have the humans, the Archai, the Darkmere, the Gnomes, the Halflings, the Elves, the Scar, and the Dwarves. And some of those lore pieces have revealed some interesting aspects or tidbits basically towards the lore. To basically start it off, the best one to go for would be the Darkmere, because somewhere in that lore they mentioned a second faction of the Darkmere called the Dreadmere. And I personally would like to see something like that throughout the scale of some of the races. At least there's a few out there where I could see something like that happen. We look at the Halflings, we know that they have 3 factions. If there's a possibility maybe to kind of bring that into the mix of the races as well. And to look at it from the most interesting standpoint when it comes to the race would be the humans, because there's so much room for these guys to expand upon when it comes to the humans. You could have a human race that is just, you know, pure evil, or, you know, pure goodness.
Well, the thing with the humans is that, you know, a human is a human is a human. You're more or less just sectioning them off by faction at that point.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
That's not a bad thing, though. I mean, it's still, if given the choice between a good neutral and an evil human, well, we all know what I'm going to pick, but still, you know, it's more choice. It's more flavor on top of what you already have.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You know,
I mean, just to add to that, I mean, the differences you're going to have in different flavors of humans is all dependent on where they are.
Yeah.
And what kind of resistances they might get. There's got to be a different flavor to them.
Oh, definitely. You could, you know, if you look at it like mountain people, you could have barbarians or even giant humans that live off, you know, in the cold, for instance. But let's go and quickly touch back on the Darkmere and start with those, because that's definitely something that sparked my interest when I was reading the lore. And then we heard about the Dreadmere being mentioned as a faction of the Mere. They were basically the ones that kind of wanted to go and kill their god, whereas the Darkmere tried to protect her, or, you know, keep her alive and all this lot. I would definitely like to see something like that happen. It doesn't necessarily have to be for every race, but for some of them, I'd like to have some choices. So if we look at it from what we know about the Darkmere, they seem to be pretty much an evil race. And how could we see like the Dreadmere come into play? And that's,
well, I mean, the most obvious way to bring that particular race, or we'll just say like a branch of a race, is by progressing that race's story,
Mm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you could do this a couple of different ways. I mean, you don't necessarily have to make it a playable race. Just having that race in the world will help with your immersion because you're bringing their lore to life, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Correct.
Making it a playable race is again still a good thing if you can manage to pull it off. But the most difficult part is how do you differentiate it from the regular Dark Mirror? You know, I mean, will the resistances differ and that's it? Will they have different skin tones, maybe different model? Depending on the lore, I mean, we know the Dark Mirror are an aquatic race, but maybe the Dread Mirror branch off and maybe almost evolve in a different fashion.
yeah, they basically had one lung, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting how you could differentiate technically the same race in two different ways to make them feel separate.
Mm.
But introduction-wise, I think that's pretty easy.
Yeah, I agree. I think it also just adds another layer to any type of a race that you have, that you can actually bring different lore into that race itself, so that ultimately you spice it up over time and you can introduce new things, especially if new land comes into the mix. Ultimately, through about 2 or 3 years, they discover new lands. Could be new races on those lands.
Yeah,
absolutely. And we know with Terminus that all of these races are technically alien races,
and they also
in perspective.
And there's also been mentioned though that there's also elements from their home planets that have landed on Terminus as well, which could help advocate and help build that story. For instance, maybe the Dreadmere found something that kind of mutated them into that different look, per se.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the old EverQuest lore, the Dark Elves are basically elves that are corrupted by the God of Hate in a rook, right? There's nothing saying they couldn't do something similar. It would obviously be an homage to EverQuest with good reason, but there's a lot of things that you can do.
Yeah. There's a few races out there that are definitely very tricky as well. If we look at the Archai, they're kind of like a molded sentient being. But they ain't technically something that was, they're like Frankenstein's monster,
right?
More or less. So
yeah,
it would be very tricky to kind of advance the Archai. But the Halflings, for instance, they could even be advanced that they become fully, not necessarily fully grown per se, but they peak that level. What's up, Josh? You having fun, are you?
He's messing with everybody in chat.
No, it's just what you're saying right now about become fully grown, they become fullings, is what they've written down.
You take two halflings, mush them together, you get a fulling.
Okay, so yeah.
Stop it, guys. So apparently the Voice of Terminus show 2018 has added a comedy element to the mix.
Can't be serious all the time.
God. Funny.
Gotta have some fun with it.
But where could you guys see, the other races have the possibility to advance or change up the way they look or the way they behave from a perspective of the Ogre. The Dwarves, for instance, you can have maybe a race of Dwarves, as we know that they seem to be connected to the cold. So you could maybe have a race of Dwarves that are only resistant to heat or whatnot, or they have to be in the deepest, dullest places on Terminus, so that's how you could, some of these races you could definitely advance with very little thought and effort.
Yeah.
But if you look at Archai, the Ogre, and even the Scar. And alone the Gnomes. What could you do there?
Well, let's go to each race and think about how we can actually diverge it, or how a different copy of it could be introduced. So we've already hit the Dark Mirror. Which one do you want to do next?
Let's have a look at the. Let's go with the tricky one. Let's go with the Gnomes.
Okay.
Okay. So the Gnomes in traditional Dungeons and Dragons used to have the Swiftneblin, which were basically gnomes that had a more magical side to them, and they were also underneath the ground. They were evil gnomes itself. And
I was going to say, with the gnomes in Pantheon being pure energy, we know their history. They weren't always energy.
Yep.
Are you okay?
What's going on here?
Good Lord.
Chat's cracking me up today.
I know. So we know that through the gnome lore that they split. You know, you had ones that were more worried about the power, more, you know, just aggressive in their knowledge, and then you got the other ones who were basically imprisoned and then transformed. What if some of the other faction actually managed to survive? What would they look like? Would they be energy as well? You know, maybe they're flesh and bone. If they're energy, maybe they're a different type of energy, you know?
Yeah, that's actually a good point. So you could have something like, I don't know, undead energy, you know, to...
You could.
Well, yeah, we'll just call it negative energy, you know?
Negative energy, there we go, yeah.
You could have, like, events happen in Terminus. Maybe their god does something, kind of, you know, tries to trick them into doing something stupid. And, you know, they hit this negative energy spark and become, you know, evil. Or they have a higher death rate or something like that. Or their energy is uncontrollable. So they can't... They have to find a different way to keep themselves conform into the sentient being that they're trying to resemble.
Right. And Ark even brings up another point. Well, I mean, we know that the gnomes are bound to, like, their mask, that metal mask that they have, right?
Yeah.
And the wrappings are, well, for lack of a better word, enchanted so that it helps contain their essence. What if these other gnomes had to resort to a different material? You could perhaps use a stone. There's nothing really saying that it has to be something different.
Yeah.
Maybe instead of being a more mystical, these are more primitive style of a gnome, and they're more melee styled, so they would have, like, they almost look like a mix between a gnome and an Archai. You know, they have a stone shell, but there's energy linking it all together. They're just small and cute. Just as an idea, anyway.
Yeah, there's definitely lots of room. That's the great thing about the lore they presented us with. It's so open. There's so much room to speculate, theory craft upon, and I think it's actually a good approach to what they're trying to do here. It helps them bounce off ideas, you know, discuss things. It gives them more leeway to, you know, come up with crazy stuff and
so long as there is a proper lore to them, any new race that does come in the future, they can't just create them for the sake of creating them. They've got to fit into the world properly.
It has to. It has to basically fit the lore of the race itself, and obviously somehow make sense to the lore of the world itself as well. The events that are happening. You know, there has to be a reason behind it. Why, you know, this race has shown up now, or why they're now in the forefront of story.
It does need to make sense to the lore and to the current state of the game.
Correct.
You know, you can't just be like, okay, the game's been around for a while, let's just throw another race in there. You know, it's been done countless times before, and it's been fine for the most part. But it's always felt like it was only half done. You know, it's like being half baked.
It's like with the gnomes. We know that they are good with tinkering and, you know, stuff like that. So they build all the mechanical gadgets and whatnot. Having even the race maybe find a way to bring their wisp body back to a normal functioning sentient being. Maybe, you know, there's ways to, you know, give them disadvantage. Maybe they lose all the ability to tinker with stuff, with mechanical gadgets and all this lot. You could also add ways where, you know, maybe the original gnomes don't want nothing to do with them because they see them as...
That's very possible.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to look at the gnomes, how they were before they became entities, with the obvious split between them, the two factions of them, if they were brought into Terminus, it would be obvious that they would not see eye to eye. They would not just welcome their brothers home, because they would have issues with each other. But right there is like the drama of the story, right? Because every story needs a little drama to be interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, what kind of things would you like to see, though, when it comes to the gnomes?
Are we still talking? Yeah. I honestly would love to see evil gnomes or something along those lines, where there was some sort of a conflict between the normal gnomes that they have right now, and a primitive type race, as you said, with the stone type gnomes as well. Something that really says, well, you know, we were here long before the other lot came along, and this is how our culture works. We're not interested in the other ones. So you have two different cultures, and obviously there's some sort of a split between them along the lines.
I'm kind of on the same page here as Josh. I mean, we all know that I gravitate more towards the evil style races just because I find them more interesting, and we know that gnomes are more or less neutral. In my mind, neutral basically has always been good. It's like, if you're not actively out trying to make people's day terrible, then you're a good guy. But neutral races have always bugged me. So seeing an evil gnome, I would actually be more inclined to give it a shot, because it would, to me, it feels like it would just fit me a little better and be a little more interesting in the story.
Yeah.
It also adds, you know, if they do touch on their existing races and try and add plot twists and different molds of the individual races, it's something that's never been done before. It's something that is definitely, for me personally, I would find that very refreshing. Is one a very refreshing approach to how I approach the game in the years to come. Instead of, you know, adding all these atypical new races to the game, actually look at what you have there and see what you can actually do.
But okay, so let's say that there was an evil gnome race. I would love to see you actually earn that evil side along the line, that you uncover it, that you unlock it, so to speak, through various actions that you might take along the way. And I think that if they are going to make these different gnome races and classes, not even just gnome, but any other class, that it is something that is worthwhile in terms of what they offer to the class itself, in terms of hit point increase or energy reduction at the end of the day, or something on that
basically
front.
Just not a carbon copy of the other gnomes.
Well, what about actually adding that twist to it, where we know there's going to be limitations for some races where they can only play certain classes. But what happens if you take that evil gnome all of a sudden, and you can maybe play a class that isn't generally there for that for that race.
Mm-hmm.
That would also add a little twist to it as well. Being able to dabble in classes that you would normally not see fit or suitable for the Gnome race or the Archai or the Ogre.
Yeah, I mean, Art comes up with a really good idea again, like, maybe an evil gnome would be more about stealing energy. So you could make them vampire-esque. Or you could have them be more absorbent to magical energies.
Necromancer.
Well,
I mean, it would fit.
I mean, if you were just in their presence, maybe you would tick off a hit point every 5 seconds or something like that, type of thing. Just in their presence. And it's not enough, because maybe you will regen that after every 6 or 7 seconds. But I know that'll play havoc with the game itself. But it would be pretty cool.
What about
it would be different.
What about having, counter effects happen? So, instead of, like, let's just take an example of a healer. Instead of casting a heal on an ally, instead you would do the opposite. You would have to drain the life from the encounter that would basically go and siphon off to the person that you selected as your defensive target, or something like that. So maybe you take the classes themselves as well, and you reverse the abilities. That kind of adds a little twist to it as well.
It could be. Yang. That's almost getting into the realm of a different class, because you want your classes to be the same regardless of your race, but you want your race to kind of add just a slightly different foundation for that class to stand on. So if you could add something like, say, an evil gnome would be obviously a little more offensive. So maybe whenever they do use an ability, they can, or let's say they get a buff, as an example. You toggle it on and off. Okay, well, it's on. You expend some of your mana to do extra damage. If you were a caster, it would increase the cost for a little boost. We're talking not a whole lot, like a very small single-digit percentage almost. Enough to where it's like, hey, that's neat, but not enough to where you're like, this is game-breaking, he's OP. And the same would go for if you were, say, a warrior. It would add a little bit of magic damage to it at the expense of your mana, because you're offensive. You're looking to hurt people. But, that comes with its own challenges. If you were a warrior in that instance, you would actually be required to sit down and med, essentially making you almost a hybrid, but not so reliant on mana. It's just a tiny little extra flavor to it because of your race. Yeah, just little things, just tiny little things is what would make it feel different,
Yeah.
But we've been on the gnomes for quite a while, so we should move on to another one.
Yeah, let's go and move on to
just one more jump on those evil gnomes. If it would be also great on their negative energies, if and it's just a visual effect, but around their feet, and you said the bubble with the grass. It turns that grass like black as they move through it.
That would be pretty cool. Or if you left like a small shader trail behind you.
Yeah.
So whatever's in your, like, just a small trail, it's just a black little overlay trail to it. I mean, that'd be really neat too. I actually kind of would love that for a Dire Lord.
Let's have a look at the let's go and take the elves.
Okay.
Because they're kind of a mixed breed at the moment. They're a mix out of high elf, dark elf, normal elf, wood elf,
forest elves.
I actually feel the opposite. I feel like they've been cut down and more made to be a little more narrow in the elf category, we'll say, because they're not wood elves, because that's what we have halflings for, and it's plainly obvious that halflings are the wood elf almost replacement. They're more a mix between high elves, which are traditionally city-dwelling elves, with half elves, which were very broad, because we know that elves are like they're closer to nature than a human, but they're more farming and stuff like that. But they still enjoy their cities. When we first thought about this topic, the elves, I immediately went dark elf. As I'm sure a lot of people out there would do as well. But the thing is, we already have the dark mirror, who are essentially our dark elves now.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and I will admit that elves aren't interesting to me at all.
Well, let's have a look at it from the perspective of what elves were all about. They were, one of the oldest races, one of the wisest races out there. They had a very high knowledge of magic and all this, yada yada. What about taking that all away and turning them almost into something really, really, really simple? Don't make them as advanced as they, tend to normally be. Elves, have always they age, they grow very old. They have a high wisdom. Take that away and look at it from that perspective as well. Bring them more down to the level of maybe the human race, where they ain't so advanced.
Right. Well, because of the way the lore is for Pantheon, the only way I could see them bringing in a new elf would be half elf, from my perspective. That would fit well.
Yeah.
Because we know that they're not an evil race. They would most likely get along with humans, at least tolerate them. So, half elf to me just seems like the very obvious go-to.
Yeah.
Since every other elf has been approached somewhat, until you get to like the Forgotten Realms crazy stuff like moon elves and sun elves and grass elves and tree elves.
Exactly, it is like every variant of elf you can think of.
Right.
It would be nice to actually mix it up with some sort of a technological type of elf, where you have like a techno elf. That's what I'm thinking about, but it's not really a techno elf, is it? Steampunk elf.
That's an idea too. Maybe there are a lot of fans of steampunk out there. I'm not actually one of them, but it does have a very unique kind of look and appeal to it. I'm just not certain it would actually fit in the world of Terminus, where gnomes are kind of like the high-techy kind of guys, but it's all through arcane means.
Yeah, I just find elves, personally, I find them extremely boring. They've just been done to death in terms of different races, different type of things, and I don't know how else they would spice it up.
Well, they could looking at your technology-based approach, maybe they could
a mixture of technology and magic.
Add magic around, the structures and buildings and stuff like that. So that's one way to give them that technological advancement, because you do want to see some kind of competition happen. Within the races themselves, the races shouldn't be I'm unique to this, I'm unique to that, and I'm unique to that. There should be some kind of physical advancement, because the many years that they've been on Terminus, they're gonna have to have caught one or two things from the opposite races that they try and recreate, backwards engineer, learn from. So. And we all know elves are pretty smart, so why couldn't they learn from the gnomes? And maybe come up with not necessarily something where they mess around with elemental energies and create machinery and sorts. Maybe they do it on a more simpler level.
Right. I would certainly be willing to give it a shot. I wouldn't just outright dismiss it if they were to go to some kind of almost technological appearance for, say, an additional elf race, but they would have to make it look and feel like it was technology based more on the arcane. Rather than, oh look, I've got a computer here. Let me hop on my motorcycle and zip around. It's like, no thanks. But that's again my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, I really do think that if elves had to have some sort of a technological edge to them, excuse me, they need to infuse it with magic to make them do anything whatsoever. And maybe that's the approach that they do take over time. It's got nothing to do with computers, ones and zeros, or anything like that. It's more about making their lives easier with mechanized structures that might be easier to use with magic.
Mm-hmm. Could you guys even see elven races that don't like each other?
Oh yeah,
don't get along with other races?
Definitely. Yeah, I do.
Yep.
Mm.
You can always like the Darkmere and normal elvish race. Anywhere where you get conflicts, even class conflicts as well in terms of elves. Your mountain elves versus your city elves, or different things like that.
Yeah.
But they'd really have to spice it up properly.
Yeah. Personally, I find elves in general just to be, again, boring.
Well,
done 1,000 times.
Yeah, that's the big problem, though, isn't it? It's been done 1,000 times. And they almost represent every other race they are in game with. In some form or fashion, they have the abilities to replicate all the other races. You've got the high elves, the wood elves, the dark elves, the takish elves, the small elves, the large elves, you name it. You've got it all in there, and it's done over and over again. And that's why the elves that VR have done are very refreshing, because they seem to be almost, they have to rely on others to help them as well. They're not those typical snobby, I'm in your face, what do you want from me, puny human or puny gnome or whatever. No, they actually do have issues where they have to get along with the human race, and they have to rely on the help of the humans and so forth and so forth. So it's definitely very refreshing, and it's one I see very hard to do, to kind of advance upon them. Take them to a different area without treading too much into what we've seen 1,000 times already.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, the one thing I am quite happy with is, after seeing VR's approach to the halflings, that they are going to do something unique and different with the elves. I would assume. You know, they've looked at it, and they're probably just like us. They're sick to death of just seeing the bog standard traditional side of the elves. Sorry.
You could even maybe have evil elves come in, take command of these elves, and turn them into slaves, for instance.
Yeah.
You know, so there's definitely some leeway to go. I wouldn't personally want to see too much advancement on what we've seen 1,000 times before. But you know, I actually do enjoy the approach that VR are trying to spice things up, mix it about a bit,
but keep them familiar enough.
Throw it into a bowl, whizzle it around, and keep it still so familiar that we still feel the connection to the individual races.
Right.
So, Lex, I'll let you pick the next race.
Duh. Scar.
Oh.
Come on now. Well, we all know that the Scar, the way they look now, is not how they originally looked. They were cursed to look the way they are now. So it's ridiculously easy. You just have a faction of Scar before the curse.
Yeah.
Or maybe a faction that wasn't enslaved, you know, from their past.
You could even have a faction that maybe not, that they don't have so many spikes. They look almost human-like.
Yeah. To be quite honest, you probably go back in their history, and they're probably linked to elves somewhere along the line, by the looks of it.
Maybe. I think it would be very interesting to see how the Scar looked before the curse.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, let's face it, the Scar, the way they look now, how they got cursed and they basically turned inside out, they look mean as hell. I love it.
Well, the great thing about the Scar is we know they're pure evil. You could have a pure good race. But that could be the more moderate, not so bony, not so not so many sharp claws on their body type of Scar that have kind of like learned to adapt and respect what Terminus has offered them as a race, a new home.
You could even just do this like personal vendetta thing where this other Scar faction who, through whatever means, managed to not get cursed or reverse the curse, they're out to get rid of the cursed ones, you know?
Yeah.
Or so they're not necessarily good, although they would be perceived that way because their entire purpose is to eliminate the Scar.
You know,
yeah,
we know that the Scar fight against each other as well. You know, it's the strongest again. You know, the strongest survive. So you could even have maybe some of the weaker Scar who get away. They drift away into the high mountains or into the far deserts and create a smaller race there, and you know, they're seen as weak and not a challenge, and you know, throughout time you get the Scar Wars. I think that's a great title actually for an expansion.
God.
I think that is a great title. Pantheon, Rise of the Scar Wars. That is just a perfect expansion name right there.
I can see the expansion now. A New Hope.
Oh, no, that's smoke.
Or False Hope.
You've gone too far now with Scar Destroyer. But no, honestly.
What has happened to my life?
But to touch on what he said there, though, with you know, Scar Wars and taking this to a more serious note, this is something that I would definitely like to see happen as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be every time they introduce new races or anything like that, but have an expansion dedicated to a new race that they bring in that, you know, tells you the story as you go along, as you learn about them. That's something I would definitely love to see happen. Is a bit more storytelling in that aspect, not just adding the race because, hey, people have been playing the game for 3, 4, 5, 6 years and they're getting fed up with the races that they have. Be creative. Either be creative with the existing races that you have, or if you do bring out an expansion, really connect with that expansion to the new race that you're going to implement and actually tell a proper story. Maybe the race isn't available to us right away. We have to earn it.
You need to unlock the story.
You have to unlock the story. You have to do a certain quest series or go through certain dungeons or whatever. Definitely something I would like to see with the Scar.
Well, I'd also be quite interested to see what hybrids you could have of the Scar. I mean, if they're bred with the Ogres.
Well, here's the thing about that, though. The Scar hate everybody. It's a miracle that they breed. So I don't think there would ever be any half-breeds in terms of with the Scar.
Yeah.
It seems like an impossibility. I mean, you would have to use magical means to do the thing, and it's like
and
we're getting into shady topics.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a bit anyway. The thing is, though, with these races, I don't need to have every single race have these advantages or these abilities or these possibilities at all. I'd rather have maybe, you know, a certain race have more options and features available to it, whereas another doesn't. Like they've done with the classes. We look at the classes, the Darkmere and the humans, they can do almost everything, or they can do everything. Whereas an ogre has 4 choices, and you know, a lot of people don't agree with that necessarily, but I find it very refreshing. Having these limited, because it gives them room for future advancements, future mock-ups. So maybe the Darkmere and the humans don't get that much love later down the line, whereas maybe an ogre will, and the elves and the gnomes might get more love, whereas the others don't. And I'm perfectly fine with that. And it kind of brings back that instant gratification. I only play this race, so I need to be able to do this. No, you don't. No, you don't. Why?
Right.
Where's this written? It doesn't have to be like that. And I think that would bring a lot more of a freshness as well to it. Not everything has to be treated, not every race has to be treated equal.
No. I mean, even with some of the choices or class choices for the Scar, I don't necessarily agree with. I don't agree with the Scar Monk. But again, I mean, it's not my game. It's not my place to really look down upon it. But I just I don't agree with it, so I just don't play it.
And we also don't know the full. We don't know all the lore of all the races.
Don't. We have like a tease of the lore.
Yeah.
Correct. So the monk, after them creating more lore on it, might be an obvious choice.
Mm-hmm. It might just fit. Just gotta wait and see.
Exactly.
But there's lots of room and advancement possibilities with some of these races, whereas some of them it's really hard to think about. Anything you guys want to add on the Scar?
No, it's just very difficult to.
More spikes. More spikes. That's what I want to add to them.
You could maybe have, if you see the imagery where the legs are kind of like animalistic, maybe you have a race of Scar that almost walk normal.
Maybe. Listen, I because I'm a fan of the Scar. There's a lot of the lore that I'm kind of dying for more, to be honest.
Yeah.
It would be very nice to see more, but more important things.
Yeah, they seem to be fairly low on the roster to sort out.
So, Josh, we'll let you pick the next.
The Archai.
Okay. Well,
so
go on then.
No, I was just going to say, again, they seem to be very similar to the Scar in terms of they're fairly unique. So the differences you're going to have with the Scar, or with the Archai at the end of the day, is going to be minor.
Right, help me out with the. I don't know if it was the Scar or the Archai. Maybe even chat knows this. But what race was it where they bred 7 females so that they could basically carry on with their offspring? Was it the Archai or was it the Scar?
The Scar, when they were cursed, basically their queen became the only way for them to give birth.
Okay, so
and then after they fell to Terminus, the curse seemed to be weakening a little bit, and they were able to start breeding again, slowly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the Archai seemed to be a, like I said earlier on, a Frankenstein's monster. They were an enslaved race who basically broke out the bounds or whatever, and they were, turned into this Archai. And well, we've seen very old imagery where they have, by the looks of it, male and female
models.
So there's definitely room for them to expand. But where could you see it? Because when I see the Archai, I think it's something made out of clay.
Yeah.
To me, the Archai have just always been like a golem.
Yeah.
That just happened to be animated by using an energy-based being.
I would like to see different materials if that is the case. Then.
Yes.
That you have the Archai being constructed out of, if that's the case. Each different type of Archai, difference in Archai, will give you different resistances.
That would be very cool.
They even remind me more like a shift changing being. They could easily mold into something different.
I don't, because to me they've always looked like they're made of stone. So it kind of like what you are is what you get.
Michelangelo looks at it for a while and then boom. You've got.
I need to shave. Chisel.
Exactly.
But like, what would you think of as like another race based upon the Archai? I mean, the only thing that
maybe a different mass. You know, they're golem-like, stone-like. Maybe they have a different.
So, like, say there's a crystalline version of the mark.
Yeah, crystalline maybe, or maybe there's one out of wood.
Lava.
Right.
Yeah, something like, you know.
Fireball! I win!
Just something crazy like that, you know.
Right. What if it was a case like, we know the Archai were enslaved and basically forced into these bodies. What if it's like their attempt to create, because I don't remember if there was anything about their reproduction, but maybe they try to build, you know, their, like, some children, and it backfires, you know?
Agreed.
Instead of having 2 legs, they got 4.
Spider Archai, best one ever.
But you know, it's definitely a very tricky race to look at and see. And you know, like I said a few minutes ago, maybe that's a race that you won't see something happen.
Yeah,
maybe not.
And I'd be perfectly fine with that. Like I said, not all the races have to have these advancements. You know, choice matters. Essentially, at the end of the day, you know, you have to choose wisely. Just because you might like a certain race and only want to play a certain race, and you know they come and upgrade a race that you don't like, bite your tongue, swallow your pride, and just, you know, go for it.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a video game. If you don't like something, don't play it.
Yep.
And I don't mean the whole thing. I mean, if you don't like elves, don't play an elf. It's very easy to get around this whole, oh, I don't like this. Then don't do that. You know? Just a thought. You don't like the Scar? Don't play a Scar. Pretty simple.
Yeah. So let's go and have a look at the, we've had the Scar, we've had the Gnomes. Let's have a look at the Ogre. I love the Ogre. You know, I can see a lot of ways they can go with the Ogre. Especially the way they're telling their story. Smart, intelligent, strategically manifested for war. There's a lot of ways they can go with them. And not to touch on the other subject, but half. Definitely you can throw half right in there. But from what we've seen so far, they seem very bulky. I could see a more athletic Ogre.
Well, from what we've seen in past streams, I will admit that I'm not super happy with the model.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
if you look at them from the side, they kind of look like they got a pot belly and they're hunched over and they're just like, duh. I know they're not supposed to be the dumb typical ogres, but they appear to be, and that to me that's a bit of an issue.
I really just want them to come in with an ogre that is actually looks super strong or big, but it's not like a fat thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I understand that ogres are big and mean, you know, but they kind of look like they're overweight chumps. Like, oh, I could just, you know, I can run for 30 seconds. He'll be out of breath and I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being warrior, like, you know, like a culture of warriors almost, how the lore seems, you would expect them to be just a little more on the fit side.
Yeah. Definitely. But I could even see, you know, an even bigger ogre.
Maybe something like a feral ogre or something. Yeah. Where they're technically more animalistic. Because we know these ogres are supposed to be, you know, a little more akin to like human level intelligence. They're supposed to be extremely good strategists and tacticians. Yeah. So, you know, it's one of those things where you balance it. If they're super strong and big, they're usually dumb. That's what a lot of these fantasy style games have taught us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so we've got a big ogre who's not an idiot. So, I mean, if someone really wanted that feeling, you could add a feral ogre where he's just completely massive, like all around just bigger than your typical ogre, but he's dumb as a rock.
I could even see, you know, a racial attribute of ogres that are very old very wise, for instance. You know, long grey beards, and you know, they're not necessarily a playable race, but you know, a race of elders like ogre elders or something like that. That you know, they don't mess around with the normal ogres. You know, they are far in the high mountain peaks, just doing their thing, meddling with all the dark magic that they could possibly meddle with, and try and create havoc and create, you know, dimension portals to different planets, and you know, all the crazy stuff basically. And I could also see the dumb ogre.
Well, I mean, I know some people who do enjoy role playing, and they enjoy that big dumb kind of character, because it's enjoyable to be, you know, that guy you just run headlong, because that's what your character's supposed to be like. Ogre smash! But with the Pantheon ogres, you know, I don't think that's even really going to be an option.
Not necessarily dumb in the sense that they, you know, that they speak stupid or anything. They just have, you know, clumsy moments. You know, there's a dumb. They have a simple way of being. They're not so advanced as their normal ogre buddies. So their huts aren't.
So instead of building, they find caves. So you could be like a cave ogre or something.
Yeah.
And for lack of a better word.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the ogres would typically be similar to shamans type of things. At least their background is more a primitive type of a magic that they use.
Yeah, I mean,
ultimately bones, skulls, blood, that type of thing on their magical side of things, if they do have any.
With the ogre, with the twist that's been presented to the ogres, this is another difficult one, I feel, because it would end up being like the humans, where you're not necessarily going to make a new race that is akin to the ogres. You'll end up just making a new faction that might be like 5% different in certain areas, kind of thing, like just slightly different. So I don't know if I could see another ogre race, to be honest.
It's more maybe along the lines of NPCs, so not something that we can necessarily dabble in, but you know, like you just mentioned, different factions that kind of tell the story as you go along with your normal ogre. Because like I said, having these different twists and approaches to how a race's lore is brought to you. Maybe you have to play a certain race within that race to, you know, advance the storytelling. Maybe another one, you play just that one race, and as you go through the game and engage with the NPCs and engage with the world, you get told the story this way. So that kind of gives you a lot of variance. When you're playing the game, you know, you're not going to get bored easily, because hey, you know, I've been playing Pantheon for so and so many years now with this race and going through the game from this approach, getting everything told to me. I'm going to go and try out this race where I have to go and maybe engage more, or actually learn about my background and actually play this certain race to unlock all that Terminus' secrets has for my race's lore. You know, it kind of adds that little twist of replayability, not getting bored so fast, because let's be honest, you played one race, you played them all at the moment.
Yeah.
There's really no variance apart from a few racial attributes, but they can all do the same thing. You can all play the same classes. You know, you're all the king in the story, you're all the hero in the story, so you know, there's really no difference.
Right.
Yeah, so the ogres would be more on the side of the game itself for advancements.
Right. It seems like the Not necessarily the easiest, but the more logical step.
Mm-hmm. So let's go and have a look at dwarves, and the dwarves that we have in Pantheon have, for me personally, a Coldane look.
Absolutely.
Oh yes.
And
I think they've done very well. Yeah.
That is something I really, really missed in EverQuest too. I'm sure the guys that played EverQuest, I don't know if you could play a Coldane dwarf in EverQuest, but that's something I missed when I saw the Coldane for the first time. I was like, I want to be able to play this as a race. They were so cool. They looked so interesting. The way they lived and everything, the storytelling behind them, what they were all about. It screamed to me, this seems to be a really awesome race of dwarves, and that's kind of the flair I'm getting from the Pantheon dwarves.
The biggest surprise with the Pantheon dwarves is that they are crafters, which is pretty typical of dwarves, but they're into that cloth. They mentioned the cloth, how they can make that cloth that's as strong as steel, whereas typically dwarves are all about metal. You're living in a mountain, you're mining ore, you're forging axes and armor. That's what took me by surprise. But if you're going to take a race and you're basically going to change it dependent on where they're located, so in this case, like an Arctic climate, the variations are obvious. You could have a desert one, you could have a temperate one. Every different environment could have a different style of dwarf. Yeah, technically.
True.
And it would technically fit with the dwarf's design.
Yeah. What would be pretty cool is, for instance, if you had fire dwarves, for instance. You could have bits of flame popping off their body, type of thing, and you could have just different elemental dwarves, which would be different from what we traditionally see.
Just thinking about what Lex said and touching on the environmental aspect, sand dwarves, that just sounds so cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Or desert dwarf.
Yeah. It just sounds
a little more rhymey.
Here we go back to Star Wars references. The Sand People.
Yeah.
That's how I would see. That's how I would see the dwarves living, like the Sand People.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you realize every time I see a dwarf in a desert setting, I'm like, but yeah, here you go, Jawa dwarfs, right? You just give them a big flowing robe, and you can't see their face, just beady little eyes.
Yeah, so I could definitely see a mix of
By
everything.
the way, VR, if you had Jawa dwarves, I quit. Just saying.
I could
better than Jar Jar dwarves.
I could see evil, good, neutral dwarves. I could see dwarves of different sizes as well. They don't have to necessarily all be the same size. You could have like I don't know, a dwarf that's slightly higher.
We are giant dwarves. We come to a human's waist. God.
Anything else you guys want to?
Like if you were to say, we'll just stick with the desert dwarf. I mean, there's a lot of visual things that you can do to change that as well. I mean, you could have, they're bald. They don't really grow their beards because beards, if you grow them, they can be pretty warm.
They could even have like a ghillie suit on to keep them, like a cloth over them. They cover themselves completely up. You only see their eyes and maybe,
Well, now you're getting close to that Jawa dwarf thing.
But honestly, they have like a scarf around them, around their mouthful area. They're bald and everything, and they've got, Mad Max. Think of Mad Max.
Well, yeah, but imagine if their physiology was of sand per se.
Now you're going somewhere.
Yeah, and they would just be able to. They'd be at home in the desert, but if they had to move into areas where it was more wet and that type of thing, they'd probably have to have their own unique wear so that they don't obviously get wet.
Maybe they've got the ability because of being exposed or finding some kind of rare stone or magic or whatever in the desert, maybe they are of sand, or they can basically camouflage themselves easily in the sand. So they look like a sand rock, for instance.
Correct. Yeah,
almost like a sandstone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of just picture their skin tone be like more of a yellowish, just to kind of fit in with their surroundings. Because we see the dwarfs right now, they have a very pale. You're just laughing at the lightsabers thing, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
You people know where you can take that lightsaber.
Yeah.
Shove it right up the force. But so visually it'd be very easy to do. It's all pretty much laid out for you.
Yeah.
It's
exactly.
Like, imagine having, a race of dwarves that live in the deepest, darkest dungeons, for instance. They have the ability to see in the dark.
Yeah.
They do.
Maybe
more of like a pure subterranean style.
Yeah.
Where they don't come to the surface. But although we've seen that a dozen times.
Yeah.
We've seen it a dozen times, but there's definitely plenty of room with the dwarves to go. I see room for NPC from the game perspective to advance on. I mean, desert dwarves, come on. I find it really cool, but I don't think it's something I would, necessarily see personally as a playable race.
More of like an antagonist in some storyline.
Yeah. But there's definitely room to expand both playability and story-wise with the dwarves. And then we have the race, humans. And this is where I want to touch on something from what Ark said earlier on. So I hear it a lot and I've read it a lot. People talk about having giant ogres or half ogre. They call that a barbarian. No, sorry. For me, that's a human race. A barbarian is a human race. It's that's where I see the barbarian coming from, is from the human itself. The Scots, for instance, in the UK, are seen as barbarians because they're huge. The Scottish people, Highlanders, they're not called that for no reason. And that's where I see, the barbarian coming from. Not so much from the ogre perspective, but from the human race. That's where I would definitely like to see something happen. You have huge, larger humans that are a bit more bulkier. They're very primitive. For instance, they build their houses out of simple wood and cloth. Put a foil over it so it doesn't rain.
I will admit that in EverQuest or in that franchise, it did to some level bug me that they treated barbarians as a separate race, because you're just really big, tough humans.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like, but I'm still a human.
Yeah.
Right. It would almost make more sense to do choose your race and choose your background in a way.
Yeah.
That's that way. Yeah. Go ahead.
That's where you could have the twist again.
Right.
You could. So for one race, you can choose different playable races. For the other, you have the storytelling aspect where you unlock a lot of antagonists along the way, and then with the other race, you pick that race and you choose the background of that. It adds a lot of twist and uniqueness to the individual approach to every game. So when you start off and you go through all three, you pick three races that are all different from the way you approach the whole entire game. It's going to be a completely new experience regardless when you go in. Because with the one race, you went and created a race and created a background, and now you're going to go and play out that background. So maybe next time you create a different background. So the story might slightly change. You might not get that quest at level 10 or level 20. You might get it only at level 50, and it goes a complete different direction because of the the background that you picked. And the same goes for how you pick the ogre, for instance, that only has antagonists in the game. Now you go through that game, you meet the antagonists along the way, this, that, and the other. You learn about the story, and then you have the one where you can actually pick a different race.
Right.
Where you're going. So it's always going to be a unique, different experience for you, and you're never going to be tired of the game. You're going to want to know what is going to be different this time with this race and with that race, and that's
right. Well, it's like if I use another game as an example, Guild Wars 2, how you make a character, you go through your story, and you make decisions. It bugged me to no end the fact that didn't really matter. You know, it's like if I'm going to spend 10 minutes reading all of this and then going through this and actually making a choice, it should probably matter.
Yeah.
Because it got to the point where I was making characters just to try different classes. You know, that's, if I play a human 6 times, it just gets boring. I just started randomly clicking stuff. I'm like, whatever, I don't care. You know, so to me that screams the developers spent a lot of time on this, and it's honestly for no reason. So it was a waste of time.
So let's go and look at the humans, though. You know, we what could you guys see, though? Because you know, a lot of people scream at the humans, say they're boring, because you know they're technically the race that are the most balanced, and they can play every single class, they can do everything, and that's why a lot of people find them boring. You know, we've already talked about adding factions to the human race, and this kind of, you know, intertwines with it. You know, a faction being the barbarians, for instance. But you know, what could we do to, or what would you guys like to see happen to kind of give them some interest again, to make them interesting again?
I think that's going to lie mostly in if there is a storyline for each race, the interest is going to have to lie in the story.
Yeah.
Because the human race in video games has always been the standard, you know, and then everything is based upon that standard, whether it's for the better or worse in whatever aspect, you know, because it's what we relate to the most. That's why a lot of people do it. That's why a lot of people don't do it.
And the thing is, as well, what a lot of people don't see in their you know, it comes from the subconsciousness as well. We are the alpha in the animal kingdom at the moment. You know, we're the ones that are mostly advanced. You know, we're the highest advanced beings on the planet Earth, and that's how it kind of reflects in the video games. Because how else are you going to do it? And
exactly.
You know, I'm on the same boat as Ark as well. I don't see humans necessarily as boring. They are very versatile. We are versatile in nature. We learn to adapt, and you know, with our surroundings, our environments, we're pretty smart at the end of the day. The technological advancements that we can make, we can easily adapt and get situated with what's going on around us, and you know, identify the issues. And that's where I think a lot of people kind of seem to forget about is, you know, look at the way where we are now in real life, in your surroundings. You know, it's a reflection. Right. The humans, okay, they can play everything, but hey, that's what we can do. If you look at the races that we have in any game, the human would be the only one that would be so versatile.
Yeah.
From a viewing point, they ain't overly intelligent, but they do have, you know, some overly intelligent people. They have some dumb people. They learn from their mistakes. They're very, you know, they work hard, and that's how it is. You know, we thrive to better ourselves. You know, we want to become immortal and, you know, live forever and never grow old.
Oh God, no.
But you know, that's what humans do. We're just trying to, you know, better ourselves. At least that's what we should be trying to do anyway. But what would you guys like to see? What kind of approaches?
I think that the history should define the different variants of humans. So if you have humans on a coastal section where they've lived there the whole life, then they're going to have some sort of a affinity to the environment that they're in. and thus gain benefits from that type of thing. And so their culture might revolve around the sea, around this, around that. And that's how I'd love to see humans going. There's nothing you can really change about them in their physiology. Humans are humans. But how they are developed over time makes them interesting.
See, if I take all the past streams into consideration, there's only 2 reasons that I would ever consider playing a human Pantheon. The first is because the detail of the armor, so the visuals, would draw me to that style, which I'm sorry they don't. Or the story has to be incredible. You know, we don't know if there's going to be a storyline, period, you know? So, I don't like playing a human right now. So why would I want to play a human in Pantheon?
Yeah.
You know? I think there's only one game that I've ever played that gave you race choices that I ever played a human, and that was Warhammer Online. That was it.
Would you see the races themselves, the human race? Would you see their, you know, if we take barbarian for instance, or Highlander, or whatever you want to call it, or you take a human faction, you know, Halasians, would you see that as something that you could play, or would you prefer that to be just, you know, pure storytelling?
I would like that to be a playable race, simply because if you are a fan of playing a human, okay, then you've got a human who is, you know, very medieval in castles with armor and everything, and then if that doesn't actually appeal to you, you like more of the tribal feel, it's allowing you to choose more what fits you personally. Because if you like the more tribal thing, but you don't, and you like to be big and strong, but you don't want to be an ogre, well, now you've got barbarians, you know, an offshoot of the humans. But if you do like that whole medieval chivalry style kind of thing, then you'd be just a regular old human.
Exactly.
So, Halflings.
Well,
Halflings are already a big amalgamation of other, we'll say, racial traditions from fantasy IPs. You know, we've got they're smaller, they're very, very happy people, it looks, at least by appearance. But they combine the wood elf aspects, so they live in the trees, they're very one with nature. We do know through their lore that they do have multiple factions that are very different from each other. So again, a logical evolution for playable, something extra that's playable as a halfling would have to be factions.
Yeah.
Well, there's also the aspect of, you know, curing their curse. So maybe they stay halfling, but they grow old, die.
Maybe.
True.
And maybe, you know, because of unlocking their curse, they, you know, only they can unlock the true wisdom and, you know, the history of their race. You know, whereas the Noti and the Maiden Clan, and I can't think of the third right now, but you know, they're all trying to get back to their roots and figure out, you know, what happened and all this lot. But maybe, you know, you can only do that when you break the curse, and maybe a race or a faction of halflings actually figure it out at some point.
Right.
I could
see.
Oh, something just happened.
Uh-oh. Did you break it?
Nope. It just somebody taking over my PC or something like that. I don't know.
Nope. Swear to God, it's not me. I see what's going on. The cameras are all funky. But with all of this lore that we have and such, you know, rich stories for each race and different factions that come to focus through the lore, it really, really would be a shame if each race didn't have a storyline. I mean, I know this puts a lot of pressure on VR, and I'm sorry, but it would really be a shame if they didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, it just adds to, you know, your bonding with your character, the race that you picked. You know, they deserve you deserve a story.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, granted, EverQuest 1 didn't really it had an overarching story to it, but you never had your story. You had to go create your story, and there are benefits to that.
Oh yeah.
But every now and then you want to experience a story that the lore master or that the developer or whatever creative mind behind it has to tell, you know, because chances are we're not going to get novellas or anything like that from Pantheon. There's been some really, really wonderful fan fiction, but it's all, you know, just kind of like a hit or miss. We don't know if anything's going to be close or anything. So
yeah.
A story for each race, even if it was just like a simple quest line that was like, you know, every 10 levels there's something else to do, you know, but you need friends, bring them along. It would kind of add to the experience. Because honestly, if you progress, like for me personally, you've progressed the Scar story, I want to know. It's just like in EverQuest 1 with the Ixars. I loved that lore. I always thought it was a shame that they never really, well, at least for as long as I played, never really went back and progressed the Ixar nation, you know?
I would, you know, and also adding really personal stories as well, that only you can actually partake in, or you with others of your race. You know, kind of adding that social aspect, that social bonding, that, you know, almost forcing
something that brings... like something that will bring you and your fellow halflings together. It's like almost like a bond that you and the other halfling player can share. Even if you don't really know, it's like, you know, if you're both at the NPC, that usually is a cutscene for whatever scene that's like, we'll say, just as an example, is heartbreaking. You know, can you imagine two players who don't even know each other all of a sudden striking up a conversation going, can you believe that? Oh my God. You know? Yeah. It's all about these little things that you can look at a lot of things as bad, saying, well, the story takes away from my sandbox adventure. And then, yeah, that's true, but you don't have to do it. Yeah. But on the same side, if you were to do it, there is potential for shared experiences, perhaps the creation of bonds with other people who are sharing a similar experience. And that's never a bad thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think we've discussed all 9, right?
Yep.
So let's go and have a look at the situation with
future races.
Yeah, the future races and the heritage system, and you know all the halves that you think about, and obviously additional races that you guys would possibly like to see advance the racial table, because we basically talked about ways to kind of advance the races that we have now, in ways of faction, ways of antagonists, ways of actually playing a different faction of that race. So we kind of touched on quite a lot of things for the existing 9, and then we talked about, well, we discussed we theory crafted the heritage system, which is basically something, to quickly recap, where you would create a mother and a father before you go and create your actual race and class, and based on the attributes or the choices that you've made on your mother and father being of whatever race, 25, 50, 75 and 100%, you would have racial abilities locked to you. You would have maybe a certain look and feel to yourself. So let's have a look at that. What do you want to go for first, guys? You want to go for the heritage stuff, or you want to go and have explore the idea of additional races?
I say let's go to additional races, because if we run out of time, we've already hit a lot of the heritage stuff, and you could make your own assumptions based upon additional races yourself. Yeah,
exactly.
But and I know this is completely random, that it just hit me that there's actually 3 races of humans in EverQuest. You've got humans, you've got barbarians, and you've got erudites. You know, what if they were to add like I'm not going to say that they're
Oh, looks like we've just lost everybody.
in appearance, but not human.
Can you repeat that, please?
My camera go all wonky. All right. What if they were to add a race that is human-esque, so they could appear very similar to a human, but not a human?
Mm.
You know, I would like them to keep with the bipedal kind of model or idea. I'm very, I'm against like
a centaur.
Yeah, I'm way against centaurs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, but what if they were to add something like an erudite that is very human-esque, but change them up, like, and not to the point where EverQuest 2, the erudites almost look like your typical gray aliens.
Mm.
Not that like woo kind of thing, but just keeping with a human, but making slight alterations.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, give me a second. Let's see if I've still got that document. Alright, so Dayhawk actually prepared a document with a few racial advancements. So I'm going to go through these and see what you guys have to say. So he's added in lesser giants as a future race. He's added obviously a few more attributes to it. He's actually gone into quite some detail, but we won't touch into that. We'll just talk about the possible races themselves. Could you see lesser giants be a part of the world of Terminus as a playable race, or races in general?
Absolutely, because well, when you say lesser giant, to me, that means almost like a stunted giant. You know, so they're still humanoid, so the technicalities of that particular race would work. You're shunned from giants, so you've got a reason for a bit of conflict there between your lesser giants and your other giants. Traditionally, giants are always against dragons. There's another kind of storyline you could use. And honestly, you could go either way, evil or good with them. Personally, I would lean evil naturally, because humans just want to kill everything and assume it's evil. But you could very much say that they are a good race. They're gentle, then you could make, there'd be a whole lot of jokes and memes about the gentle giants.
Yeah, another good thing about half giants is that the ogres would have a race to fear. Yeah. Where they've got to look over their shoulders and what's coming over their heel type of thing.
So he's added. I'm just going to quickly run down these and try and keep it as short as you can, because there's quite a few actually in this document. So he went with obviously lizard men.
Yeah,
pretty typical, that one. If I roll that wheel a bit.
He's added troll, which I find interesting, because if you look at troll, for instance, as well, that's actually a race widely interpreted differently. For some, a troll is short, goblinish. For some, it's made out of stone. For others, it's there's so many different interpretations of what a troll is, and depending on this is one where I say I would love to see something like that, but it all depends on the direction it would go from the visuals and the background of that race. It's definitely a very tricky one to get right, especially for the world of Terminus. From what we've heard already from the lore and everything, so that's one where I say it all depends on how they do it and how they would define and design these trolls, but definitely something I could see. Dragonborn.
Well, it's like, to stick with the trolls, I think for me, I'm not necessarily interested in the troll race. I'm more interested in what VR, how they would twist it.
Oh yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And I feel the same way about the Dragonkins. I mean, we all know that eventually, after I retired, EverQuest got the Draken, which are technically human dragon kind of thing. I don't remember, but whatever. I kind of feel like that's been a little bit done to death in the fantasy side of things as well. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it's nothing that really appeals to me.
Nothing jumps.
Yeah, there's a lot of old EverQuest stuff that people are very, very attached to, like the Froglocks.
Yeah,
and I know
that was next on the list, actually.
Yeah, Froggy's gonna
really.
hate my guts. Froggy's gonna hate my guts from this point forward, but I've always hated them.
Yep, so have I. I hate, as soon as they released that race in EverQuest 2, it came fairly late, but as soon as that race became available, I just, you know, I
just shook my head. I was just like, it's really come to this.
Yeah, I was just like really gutted, because it all comes down to how it's done.
Right.
And I'm just sorry, but they were really poorly done in EverQuest 2, and
yeah, they were childish.
I think that they came off more as a joke. Like the models were, you know, super hoppy and super bright and super, oh my god, it's just more, it seemed like it felt more like it was for shock value rather than seriously taken on. Yeah. And I think unfortunately that's going to stick with me for the rest of my days. I'll never take a frog race seriously.
Yeah. So you obviously had all the high and halves and wood and you name it, elf. So I'll leave those out. But Lion Men, or Kerans, as they were known in EverQuest.
I can't take them seriously. Just like as the frogs right now, I can't take them seriously. Ever since EverQuest 3 created those models.
Yeah.
Right. I actually, in EverQuest 1, they're called a Bashir. I enjoyed their look. I enjoyed a lot of their lore. I personally didn't really like playing them, but I have like with Vanguard, I had a very hard time with the cat and the dog races. It seemed like just a human with a dog or a cat head kind of thing. Yeah. I feel like if you're going to do that style of a race, you really need to go all in. I mean, you need to make it like the Scar. They're unique because look at their legs, look at you know the proportions of the spikes and everything. You know, they're very, very unique. You don't get that feel from just a furry human.
If you look at the way, you know, they've designed their concept art, their lore, the way the characters look on the website from them, it's really hard to pitch any of these animal races in Terminus. It's very hard to. I mean, because the next one's Elephant Men, for instance. You know,
yeah, I don't see it.
This is where I see, you know, this is your typical Korean-style game. That's where they have all these, you know, fluffy pups and bugs and dogs and cats and mice and.
Right. It's well, the Korean style games tend to do it on like a cute level where it's like, oh, look at a little puppy character. Oh,
to get all the tweens in, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. Granted, it's VR's game.
Yeah.
So one way or the other, I'm gonna be like, don't do this, because it's not my place. I would just say that I would not entertain even the idea of playing a race like a Froglock or of a Shear, because it just doesn't appeal to me at all. I mean, I would enjoy the lizard races, but I don't feel like it's needed. And I love my Exarchs, but I don't feel we need it.
If we look at the, you know, the only thing that would really get me to play a Lionist base, it all comes down to the design. If they look like the Klingons, for instance, right? The Klingons from Star Trek, The Next Generation or whatever, that's more in tune with how I would picture the Lion race kind of looking. Rather than what we've typically seen in EverQuest and EverQuest 2, and obviously, you know, the late EverQuest Next. It all comes down to how much thought they, you know, this would be something where they have to give a lot of thought in the design and try and get away from that typical look, because why, just because it's called lioness or lion men or Kevin, doesn't mean it has to have fluff all over its body and have paws. It could still look humanoid, but it's got some facial expression of a cat or whatever. A lion.
I personally think like the Vashir of EverQuest 1. I mean, I don't really remember them in EverQuest 2, but EverQuest 1, I remember that they did feel a little bit shoehorned, but all in all, I think the models for the time were decent. I don't think I had any major disagreeable class choice for them. So it felt like they did plan it rather well.
Yeah.
But then when you look at, like you say, the late EverQuest Next, the game was just cartoony, so the character just seemed over the top, like a giant head and big flowing mane, which it makes sense for a lion, but something about it, and I can't put my finger on it, didn't.
It just looked off.
Seemed off.
It looked completely off compared to what the human models look like.
Right, but I mean, like EverQuest 2. The little fairy characters, I don't remember what they were actually called. I hate them. Yeah, I absolutely hate them.
So let's go and carry on anyway. Elephant men.
Nope.
No thanks. Personally, I'd say no.
Half orc.
Yeah.
I could see a half orc, but that's the D&D-er in me.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I feel the ogres kind of fit that same slot. It's almost like a redundancy.
Rat folk.
Oh, like the Ratonga from EQ2?
But for instance, something
a rat folk.
I don't feel, just from the overall feeling of Pantheon, I don't feel like that would really fit. EverQuest 2 did it okay. I just thought it was a little weird, but at least they tried something different. It's just, from everything we know as a whole in Pantheon, it just doesn't feel like it would really fit.
I tend to disagree. I think that if they did something along the lines of the Skaven, like Arc Nightmare says, where they've got a rich history, kind of like the, as the game suggests, I think it could be fleshed out quite well, because then that could be a real evil race. That could see them taking dominance in the underground areas, type of thing. So I think there's some credence to that, personally.
Yeah.
Snakekin.
I think that's going close to like the lizardkin. It's choose one or the other and just go with it, because it like to make a reptile. You could change its background or its appearance to really fit any kind of reptile.
I mean, it's definitely some crazy ideas in here.
I think with EverQuest 1, the snake people were the Shasar. I probably mispronounced it. I'm sorry if I did, but I always thought they would have been a very neat race, because you have a different movement style, you'd have different swim animations, so visually it would be new and novel would probably be the best way to describe it. They did have a very rich history, and there were quite a good amount of differences visually between them, so you would have that customization. And I don't recall any game really trying to do a snake style character, so
I think if they did it quite cleverly, I mean, I don't know if you remember that old program V. V. I don't know if you remember, there used to be that program on television. I can't hear you, Alexa. Can you hear me?
It's just not.
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. And they... they masked it pretty well in that regard.
It
but there were slight differences.
It doesn't necessarily have to, look like a snake. You could just have like the skin could be like, snakish. Your eyes, instead of the normal way you would blink, they would it'd go vertically instead of horizontally.
Right.
So those kind of aspects on looking upon the snakekin ability. That's how I could see it possibly working. Is you don't necessarily have to have that snakish tail and slither around, but you could be a normal being with 2 legs and 2 arms, but you have maybe snake skin. You have the ability to blend in with your environment, the green and whatnot, depending on what color you've got, and you blink differently, and maybe because you've got the snake skin, you've got a higher resistibility. You don't
breathe in noxious areas, type of thing.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, even if they were to get away from the bipedal model and actually go with the tail, I can't remember what the mythological creature is called.
Medusa.
I know Medusa was one, but there's one in D&D. I can't remember. Anyway, someone will correct me.
I draw the line at laying eggs, though.
Yes, but I mean, it would be interesting to see. Instead of having the typical 2 feet, you have the wiggling tail. Gorgon. There you go. It would add a certain visual novelty to it, right? And you are basically kind of keeping with the more upright vertical character. Because when I think of something like a centaur, I think it's more of a horizontal creature than a vertical, right? Because you've got that big horse's ass, and that I see lots of issues with, just period. In terms of game mechanics, everything. I see too many issues. So I think with a snake one, it could potentially work.
He adds walruskin into the mix. Another one
same.
where
I won't say no, but I'd say it wouldn't be for me.
Yeah, it all comes down to how they would approach it, and design wise and look wise. Because when you picture a walrus, that's all you're gonna get.
Well, I mean,
and how they're gonna hold swords with flippers.
I mean, we could sit here and go all the way from aardvark to zebra, and figure out which mixture would work. But the fact of the matter remains that no matter what it is, it's all a personal opinion. If you liked it, then you would probably play it.
Yeah.
I mean, some people might find walruses adorable. Personally, I think they look dumb, so I obviously wouldn't play one. But if you enjoyed it, you would play it if it were there.
Yeah.
The next one is one I could definitely see, and I could definitely see this relate to the Ogre race, the Orc race from a viewpoint, is Cyclops.
That Cyclops to me kind of fits in the realm of giants.
Or in the giant area. An Ogre is still fairly tall, but I could see that maybe working. A one-eyed being.
I do think it would be interesting to see a game more on, in EverQuest style, we'll say games, like orcs and the gobblinkins are always antagonists, always, right? So I think there's room there to add a goblin kind of player race. So then you could experience the story from that side of the mirror and kind of get a whole new perspective.
Yep, so I'm going to quickly go and bounce off some of the other ones, like you've got fox, wolf, dog, cat, tiger, kin.
Any animal plus whatever.
So there's another one he's added is gargoyle.
Well, a gargoyle is more of a magical creation.
Yeah.
I feel Archai really fit that. The Archai would fit that slot.
Yeah. That's where, that's how you can look at it as well, is maybe that is part of the Archai. They create something that's gargoyle-ish.
Right.
So we already talked about goblin definitely fitting. Now this is interesting, changeling.
Well, Okay, so if you had a character that could morph its appearance, you know, there's issues like if you change from a human to a dwarf, does that mean you inherit different abilities, which means it just ends up being a buff with an illusion attached, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you run into mucky waters with constantly flip-flopping your factions and everything. Like maybe you hit a scar change ability when you're in the middle of Throne Fast, and well, poop. And then, you know, if you're going to be able to change all these races, you are most likely going to get your natural form is going to be very bland. Maybe if it were to work, they would start off with like very, very almost unacceptable stats, and you would be forced to shapeshift in order to get stats that would better, you know, fit. But you know, then you run into the problem of people min-maxing. You know, why should this person be able to change his stats on a whim and I can't because I am more loyal to my racial decision?
You know, he adds also, you know, the Birdmen, and you know, we know that there's Aviacs.
Yeah.
I can see that not as a playable race per se, but more as, you know, something that we might encounter somewhere down the line as NPCs or something.
Right.
And then he's, you know, suggested Angelkin, Demon Blood.
While I'm a fan of like demon lore and stuff like that in a lot of books that I've read in the past, I don't know. Every time they've done something like that in a game, it's always come off as very chintzy and very cheap. Now, that's not to say that VR couldn't pull it off, but through previous experience, I would be less inclined to accept it.
Yeah, it's just not fitting to what we've already.
It's basically little bubble of a world. It just doesn't. There's no place for something like that in there. I feel if we were going to do a winged race, then it comes down to like, you know, like flying mounts. I don't like them. That's my preference. I know some people do, but you really have to try hard to balance that flight. You know, if it's a flightless winged character, then why even bother having wings? You know, is it just aesthetic? At which point you're basically playing one of those games where you like Diablo, where it's like you're buying wings to look cool. You know, at which point I sit there and go, why? You know,
exactly.
But I mean, you could say that about every race. It's all
definitely
cosmetic, so why do it? But I don't know.
What about
every time I see a winged character, I think Chicken Man.
What about you, Josh?
As Lexa said, now he just hit the nail on the head. It's all cosmetic. You know, it's all bits and pieces thrown together visually. But if there's no history behind it, nothing that really gives it a depth, as they would do, then they should just rather keep them off, and not even introduce them.
So I'm gonna fly through the last bits and pieces, and I think we'll come to the closing point. Orc. Now, for a lot of people, this is kind of touching on, you know, World of Warcraft. That's where you have your orcs. But I could still see an orcish race, because an orc is technically, you know, it's technically a human with sharp teeth, leathery skin. It's green or greyish. It's a smaller version of an ogre.
Correct. I mean, I would have something like an orc, but not call it orc.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Wiki Wacky Woo says, what about a mechanical race?
Again, I'm going to say that the Archai almost fit that better. In terms of Pantheon, anyway.
It all depends on
personal preference.
That that as well, and you know how it's all going to fit in this world. Because what's to say that there isn't another 9 races that get brought to Terminus somewhere down the line?
Yeah.
You know,
last time I checked, I can't see the future. So
who's to say that you know it's just limited to these 9? Maybe this is the first 9, and you know maybe these 9 bring chaos somewhere down the road and bring everything out of whack that they have to bring in further races to kind of, you know, give us a... What?
Josh. Gosh.
Oh, Josh.
Let's call it a dork.
Oh, dude, what's up? What's up? You know, this is... we decided to bring comedy to the 2018 streams.
This will be like the start of our blooper reel now.
Yeah. So, Centaur and Minotaur.
I think it's quite difficult to bring in any race such as that, simply because it really is a huge job for the artist to create armor types and try and keep that as well going in the game. So I don't say no to it. I just think that it's extremely difficult, I think, to pull something like that off. Right.
Yeah, like, I think that a Minotaur would be dangerously close to the Wild Torn. Granted, I think Blizzard really did a very good job on the Torn, because I really enjoyed that race.
They did, yeah.
But the thing is, I would be okay with a lot of the choices just to see how VR twists it, because I don't think that they would ever add a race and not twist it a little bit. Because, I mean, when Pantheon was first announced, I was really on the fence with a lot of stuff like, you know, Ogre, another elf, another human, another dwarf game, you know. But I think they've done a very good job in the subtle twists. So I think if we had the chance to talk to a developer or a designer from VR, it would be interesting just to hear them kind of brainstorm what might be done with a race like a Minotaur.
Yeah. And then he has basically Revenant.
Well, Revenants are the antagonists of the overarching story of Terminus.
Yeah.
And we don't really know a lot about them. Are they undead, as the actual meaning of Revenant would suggest? Or is it just the name, you know, the label of this specific race or organization? We don't really know. So it would be hard to say. If we were to turn that more towards, say, an undead, like how, again, Blizzard did quite well, I don't feel it has a spot there.
Yeah. And then he comes up with he's got vampire and werewolf. I can't see that. It just doesn't fit within the
any of the were creatures, basically.
Right. And I mean, I'm a person who I'm a fan of werewolves. Okay.
I'm a fan of were creatures. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I think just the whole lycanthropy thing is just kind of neat, but
unless there's some sort of a horror aspect to Terminus.
If it were a horror-based game, then I'd say, yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Like, I'll admit that the Worgen almost got me to come back to WoW. You know, like 5 years after I quit. Would I be interested in them if they were in Pantheon? Oh, absolutely. But would it be something I could take seriously? I don't think so.
I mean, you could have that as, you know, something that you might take on as, you know, an NPC race, you know, werewolves, you know, wolves.
It kind of feels like it would be more of a holiday event.
Correct.
Halloween comes around, they curse you with lycanthropy, and then whenever night falls, it just changes your model into a werewolf.
It would be funny if it turned you into something random. So not a werewolf.
That'd be an April.
Maybe like a were-owl or something like that.
Right. So he's got basically the Fae that we talked about earlier on, which Lex is not a fan of. For me, it all depends on how it's looked at. You know, do they have to be small and have wings and look like, you know, little pixies? They could look different. You know, they could look fairer. They could look almost elvenish. They don't necessarily have to have wings. To have that, you know, floating ability. Maybe it's, you know, just how they move along the ground. They kind of hover. It all depends on how it's really approached. Because
I just, you can't really take them seriously in battles.
No, the way
how a Fey tank is tanking a dragon at the end of the day in EverQuest 2 is beyond me.
Right.
The way it's been, you know, done. That's another race what I would find interesting to see how VR would, you know, redefine this race, but still make it familiar to everybody.
Right.
It's one of those races where I see, you know, take this race, redefine it in your vision, and you know, see what they come up with, kind of thing.
Mm.
I'm actually kind of running short on time here.
Yeah, we're almost done.
Wrap it up.
Okay.
Wrap it
up.
All I can really say is I would gladly accept more races in future expansions. That's without a doubt. My only thought would be to take it slow, take it seriously. Don't pull a frog lock, you know, where you're just trying to make it all cute.
Or a Pandaren.
You will draw people to that. But my fear is that you would scare more people away overall, because people would stop taking content seriously from that point forward.
Mm. That's definitely the forefront. Is, you know, when in 4, 5, 6, whatever years time, when the game's been released, they think about adding in new races. You know, really they have to take their time about it. Deliver the same kind of love and approach to the lore that they've done now, and you know, and even maybe hint at little bits. You know, we don't have to. They could basically take, as far as I'm concerned, this is me personally. They could take, like, you know, 2 years' time to finally release the final product of that race, and give us little tidbits here and there where we might, you know, hear about this race and go on a certain, you know, go into a certain dungeon, and you know, we unlock the storyline towards it. It's a matter of putting a lot of thought into it and passion, and not rushing anything just because, you know, people are getting fed up. They don't necessarily have to release something just because. If they take the time and approach it slowly as well, is the way to go.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say as well, Jan. That they should take it slow. Introduce it through maybe lore, that you just read about them in the odd book that you come across. And that you see maybe the odd model now and again in events that might happen through the years.
This could be like
and that would introduce them, and that would introduce them into everybody and get their tongues wagging, and then, as you say, you can unlock that race through some sort of event.
Yeah, it's definitely something, you know, they got plenty of room to expand no matter where they, you know, approach it. Be it, you know, from what they have with their original models, and obviously going in and looking at everything else that is out there. The good thing is the way they've approached some of their models, like the gnomes. We never seen anything like this before. You know, the space gnomes, or the Scar, or the Darkmere. You know, they have resemblances. The Darkmere, Dark Elf, the Scar are your Ixar, and so forth. They're on the right track in the development process, and they're adding that little bit of extra to it, and I hope that they carry that on when they go forward and they finally release their game, and they have to, you know, start bringing out new content. As long as they take their time and put as much thought and passion into it, I can see great things happening.
And they mustn't be scared to just create the odd characters that are only tradesmen type of characters.
Right.
That, for instance, a Fae or something very short that you cannot find, they wouldn't be found fighting because they just don't have the strength, maybe. Could be good tradesmen at the end of the day.
I could see that if you were to embrace the crafting side of MMOs fully. So,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, I don't know. I'm an adventurer, so that would be something that would be thrown to the side for me because I'd never even consider it. But I don't know.
So that kind of wraps up this show. I'm sure we can come up with a lot more later down the line. You know, we're just trying to basically keep the show going, keep you guys entertained while we all wait for new information and, you know, new streams.
Get the gears rolling.
Get the gears rolling. Next week, we will finally hit our 100th show, guys.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
We will be...
I mean, yay!
We will be streaming on a Friday as of the 19th this month, and we agreed upon 6 p.m. Eastern. Is when we will be streaming Friday, so keep an eye out for that. Next Thursday will be a player Q&A. We'll have a player Q&A to celebrate the 100th show. I think it's a good way to go about it as well. And thanks for joining us, especially, you know, we've been streaming this now for 2 hours.
Yeah.
So, this was a
long
big
show.
This was a big long show. We hope you all enjoyed it, and I'd like to thank everybody who's tuned in for the first time and give you a big warm welcome. If you guys have any ideas, anything you want us to talk about, it doesn't matter how small you think it is or how crazy you think it is, send it our way. Reach out to us on Discord or via email, and just shoot us your idea, and we will. We will try
these
and get something done.
these guys don't bite, so feel free to contact them.
Yeah.
Shai, anything we missed?
Not really. Looks like you guys got everything.
Cool. Then we can call it, and good chat, guys. We'll see you all next Thursday. Next Thursday will be the final time. Is it the final one? Isn't it? Check the calendar. Yep, next Thursday will be the final time we do it on a Thursday, and we will see you then at 4 p.m. Eastern. Have a great night, everybody, and thanks for joining us.
Yep.
Take care.
See yous.
Ciao.